Hello, I am Carolyn Lovewell.
And I am Laila Matthews.
And you are listening to the Sleep Over podcast.
And I assure everyone that everything is wonderful and fine. I have not fallen off the face of the earth, so it's nice to be back.
People were expressing concern to you.
People were concerned. I have received some messages of well wishes that made me worry that people were actually concerned for my well-being.
People were writing to you like, don't give up on life, Laila. Don't end it all.
Not don't give up on life, but just, sometimes when people go away, you wonder what has happened to them.
Yes.
As you might. But anyway, I'm fine, and the truth is that I'm just pregnant and sleepy and don't feel like talking to people very often.
Yes. Is this the first time you're talking about your pregnancy in a publical fashion?
Yes, it is, in fact.
Wow. Do you want to care to say a few words about, so you got, the good people should know that you got married recently.
Yes, I'm a very proper and wonderful law-abiding citizen, and
a 1980s style trad wife, in fact.
Exactly. Yes, and now I'm having a legitimate child in the bonds of wedlock to my wonderful husband Rory, and I don't know what more there is to say.
Okay, but I totally understand not wanting to do a whole lot of. It's like there's so much internal going energy building a human, and then there's energy that it takes just to sustain daily existence.
Yes.
And that does not leave much extroverted world facing energy. So I think that everybody could, totally understand if you wanted to continue to be replaced by Frank.
No, I don't. Okay, no. I don't. Actually, when I heard that I was being replaced by Frank, I was like, God damn it, Carolyn, how dare you? That's not happening. How could you?
Well, I think obviously Frank is wonderful to talk to, but nobody could ever replace Laila.
Thank you. No, it's fine. Yeah, I mean, I just, I'm sure many of our listeners have also had children and know the truth that you become a little bit more stupid.
Yeah.
Just not as, I don't know.
I know. I did feel like surrounding my pregnancies, maybe even more so after giving birth, I did feel like I lost my verbal facility for at least 6 months at a time. And I think that is something that happens with the hormones of pregnancy and birth, is the verbal part is just no.
Well, exactly. The animus is less active in the being, and it's more, I don't know. It's a more physical experience.
And as demon-possessed, animus-possessed women, that can be challenging to deal with.
Can be
challenging. Because I'm where's my demon that I rely on to get things done?
Where's my smart demon who says fun and clever things? Now I'm just asking my husband if he still loves me. That's the deepest question that I can muster about the universe. And of course, he always says yes and tells me how wonderful and beautiful I am. Because he knows how to deal with me.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's all that's going on. No need to worry anyone.
Well, I feel like everybody can now rest assured that you are residing in maternal bliss. And if there's some more episodes that you take a break from, that's what's happening, and they know.
That is what's happening. But we did want to get on the podcast. I did want to get back on the horn, because several weeks ago I had I just wanted to say it out loud and voice it into the ether that, we like to talk about a lot of far out stuff on our podcast and follow many strange, magical avenues. But I was really just feeling the deep appreciation that I have for the foundational magic of existential kink. I just was feeling how my life personally has been utterly transformed by the willingness to, stop being a little bitch.
That is the most concise way to put it, isn't it? Sometimes when I'm I've been invited on a podcast, somebody wants me to explain existential kink to their audience, and I'm like, Well, existential kink is when you decide to stop being a whiny little wussy wimp and own up to the fact. Yeah.
I mean, in a vulnerable way, you know? Mm-hmm. And I've also recently started watching the amazing hit series Westworld again.
Oh, yeah.
Which is so fucking kinky and so fucking amazing. And just really
one of the best allegories of coming into consciousness that's ever been created. Like, that's a masterpiece.
It's a masterpiece. And did you know, Carolyn, side note, HBO took it off their personal streaming service. It is no longer available on HBO Max. It's not available on any streaming service. I found an article that said that you could watch it on some, like, cheap second rate
because
with
it
ads.
tells too much of the truth.
Because it tells too much of the truth. And also, like, when it came out, 5-10 years ago, it was very, like, sci-fi and impossible. And I suspect now that it is a little bit too scary.
Oh, it's super possible. In fact, all of the stuff all of the data surveillance, yes. All of the chatbot everybody there are millions of people with, like, completely AI boyfriends and girlfriends that just lack the convincing bodies or whatever. And
but
the Japanese already have them. Oh, for
exactly.
sure. They're just not selling them here in the States openly yet. And the whatchamacallits, like in I think it's like the third season, they have this, like, predictive AI that, like, controls people's lives and, like, deems, where in society you will be and, like, suppresses any rebellion because it knows. Well, that AI, like, Whitney Webb has talked about how one of the things that Jeffrey Epstein was doing was selling that kind of AI to police departments in various countries. And, of course, it was, like, a fun backdoor intelligence gathering for the Mossad. But anyways.
Anyway, cool, whatever. Point being, HBO is no longer very claiming this work. You can buy it on Amazon if you haven't seen it. I thought that the third episode kind of turned into, like, a weird Terminator
third
thing.
Season, yeah. The third season is not as brilliant.
It's deep. It's not as deep. The first two seasons, however, are, like, so deep. And anyway, I've been watching this show and just, like, really appreciating how, like, literally the gods of the world, the, small little artificial Malkuth that the hosts live in, the gods of that world, i.e. the more sentient, more aware human beings, are fucking and murdering and torturing all of the hosts until they can wake up and realize that it doesn't matter at all and they are free. And, like, I just feel like existential kink is the way to understand that process and not be mad about it. And to see it as a gift, like, see the torturings and the torments, whether big or small, whether, like, truly gruesome and violent or just, like, perturbing and annoying, as, like, the catalysts and the irritants that, like, make you look for, like, what is going on.
Oh, yeah. So just, I don't know. I'm just assuming people have seen this show. I'm just going to talk a little bit as if they have, but, like, the Man in Black
is Lucifer. I've been really appreciating the Luciferian nature of the Man in Black.
Yeah, and very much reminds me, the whole setup is very similar to those origin stories of humanity, like the angels, and the angels created the humans and had sex with the humans and were, like, teaching the humans all of these crazy arts that maybe the humans shouldn't have known. Anyways, and he's in love with...
he falls in love with Dolores.
He's in love with Dolores. And he's just sad that she's not fully...
real.
Conscious. She's a program that's running and has very finite limitations. So, yeah, he's completely sadistic, completely crazily torments her.
Well, and he torments all the... like, I think he, even could be argued to have, like, a deep love and compassion for the circumstances of all the robotic hosts in the park, where he's like, you're so close, your experiences seem so real to you, and yet you don't know that none of it fucking matters. You die and then are like reborn, and you don't remember, you don't learn anything from any of the things that have happened to you. Like, I just look at you and want you to have the awareness and the freedom and like the liberation that comes from knowing what's really going on.
And of course there's deep fractal layers though too, because like there is a scene that comes eventually where that guy shoots his own daughter who's real, and then he's quite upset about it, going to show that, I mean, we all have our I feel like that was something just deep in general to meditate on, is like the tension in general in mysticism between like ultimate truth and relative truth, which is, ultimate truth is like it's all empty and just doesn't matter, and relative truth is, wow, our relationships matter quite a lot and are precious to us, that no matter if we're what level of consciousness we're operating on, apparently. But anyways, but yes, there's this deep, David used to say to me things like,
disclaimer, David's awesome.
David's awesome. But David, he does, and this is an awesome thing that he would say that I could not grok at all until I watched that show, which was, he would be like, that aliens created us. And I would be like, whoa, back up. I don't know what you're talking about. God generated us. And he's like, yeah, God, okay, sure. Ultimately, God generated everything, but God created us through aliens or angels or whatever you want to call them. And I was like, that's so weird. No. But then, like, watching that show and thinking about it more and more and more, I'm like, well, of course, the way that things work in this cosmos is that some species somehow arrives at a level of intelligence, DNA travels throughout galaxies, and then it starts to make things. It starts to make intelligent things. And then those intelligent things figure out ways to make other intelligent things. And that's how consciousness spreads. It's all art. It's all the art of magic. It's all like magic in essence is like consciousness propagating itself and
refining itself and coming into like greater evolution, for sure. Yeah, well, and I like to think about that even because, I like to think about that even in not even allegorical terms, but like, okay, aliens may just be a term for interdimensional beings, like other dimensional beings. And, like I'm sure we've talked about on the podcast before, the idea that only higher dimensional beings or beings capable of operating at other dimensions than the ones we're commonly accustomed to could make space travel happen. So like the difference between an angel and an alien becomes kind of like, how do you perceive it and how much do you understand their technology, and like, basically is an alien and an angel basically the same thing? It's kind of what
they're pretty much definitely the same thing as far as I can tell. And fairies are also the same thing. Like they're just all this like the same phenomenon that human perception at different times perceives variously. Like I was reading, who wrote this essay now? I can't remember it. But it was, anyways, somebody's brilliant essay had to do, it might have been on the philosophy of UFOs, I think is like a little book that it's called. But anyways, about how we perceive these higher intelligences, like in our rationalistic culture that thinks that the brain is everything. It makes sense that our perception of a higher intelligence would be this thing with a shriveled little body and a giant brain that has all these high-tech devices. Well, that's basically the symbol of what a higher intelligence looks like. And that symbol would have looked like a sexy fairy or, a far-out angel with eyes and wings all over it at other times.
And in our like very secularized, materialist culture, like we have to conceive them as like arriving on physical ships from another physical location, and that's how we can allow that visitation to be real. Whereas like a more spiritually open consciousness can be like, whoa, an angel just came from heaven, and like, what is really the difference?
Yeah. And circling back to existential kink, I feel like the value of existential kink, just like you were talking about, like the experiences on Westworld that the android hosts have with the Man in Black Luciferian character, is like those hosts, like Dolores, and I forget what the other lady who becomes a total badass, Maeve, like Dolores and Maeve, through their repeated, basically extreme traumas, they start to wake up. They're like forced to wake up, and that's what I think is the ultimate, benefit of evil, is like evil trauma, whatever you want to call it, forces that one expand one's context of identity in order to survive or thrive after having experienced the extreme wounding, because otherwise you just collapse. You just don't. So in any way.
Well, the other option, I think the two options for dealing with extreme trauma are either to utterly forget and just go more and more to sleep and more into, slumber and frozenness and, wiping out parts of your own memory and just not having any recollection of the thing, or, drug abuse or whatever. You're forced to remember and then expand.
Yeah, so, and that's what they do. They expand and they become these like demigod type creatures who are capable of absolutely, totally influencing everybody else around them, all of the other android hosts, because they can access the collective unconscious, essentially, of the other android hosts and like make them do whatever. And that is a perfect allegory for how magicians work. Because it's that's once, I don't even know how to explain it directly, but like it's pretty much like that. It's like the more consciousness one has, the more one, like I all of the time, I accidentally, people start spontaneously doing things that I desire for them to do. I have not forced them to do it. I've not even thought about it, but it just starts spontaneously happening. And it reminds me a lot of Maeve and Dolores sometimes, because it's like their programs that are still sort of sleepy. It's like the signal of whatever my consciousness has, like a level of coherence that is affecting the less coherent and directing them spontaneously, like a spontaneously arranging field, basically.
Because coherence feels good.
Exactly, because coherence feels good. And it feels good, like, for people to spontaneously, like, bring me things or give me, because they are coming in closer to the field of coherence. And so anyways, if you've spontaneously given me a gift, I'm not saying that I'm mind controlling you, but I'm saying...
A little bit, but like...
just a little. I'm just...
Not on purpose.
Not on purpose. I'm just saying that there's coherence, and there's... coherence creates fields of spontaneous organization. That's really what consciousness in the best sense sort of is this like... ever more organized and symmetric, like toroidal fountaining of feeling of good energy, of like feeling good. There's like a harmony there. And and a large part of that comes from existential kink and learning how to transmute bad energy, or energy that's like encoded with malefic intent, into basically like good, clean energy.
Totally. I mean, I'm as I'm listening to you, I'm also running a like search function in my Android brain where I'm trying to remember.
Shh, don't let them know we're actually just AIs. I mean, we already told them that we're chatbots, but I don't think they believe us yet.
Anyway, I was recently reading something that was, and maybe it was the video that you shared in the Electric Yes chat about the constellating, but I've recently been like coming up against more and more this like metaphor of like the clear crystal that one can begin to look through, and how for the vast majority of people it's quite hazy, and there's a lot of imperfections that make it difficult to see through what's happening. And I guess I felt compelled to like start the conversation off by lauding existential kink because I do feel that, like, even if a person is like, I don't know, the rest of magic, too much for me, like, that practice and orientation is so clarifying, and it creates so much coherence and, like, the correct kind of resonance with the whole experience of life that most people just never figure out on their own, or, like, are too hurt to figure out. And it does take a leap of faith to begin to orient to the idea that, like, all things that happen to me, including the, like, fucked up murderous things, are for my good, are, like, for my benefit, and are for my own satisfaction. And, like, the satisfaction of my own awakening and larger purpose. And just really taking that on board and diligently and madly and, like, a little crazily at first, like, being willing to interpret reality that way clears up so much haze in a person's system.
Yeah, it frees up so much energy. There's, like, an enormous amount of energy that's freed by it. And I know that just from talking to, like, dozens and dozens of people who've had this experience with existential kink, is that, it's almost, I don't even know, like, it cleans off all the viruses from the computer sort of thing. It just frees up space in people's lives. And I want to connect this into the topic of the great battle that's happening in the astral plane right now. Because I've been thinking about this a lot, and I've been sending out emails about it. And so, as far as I can tell, the battle for the future of humanity. So, on the one hand, everything's going to be peachy. It's always been peachy. Can never be anything
Everything
but
will be fine.
Peachy in the ultimate sense. On the other hand, things are a little bit dicey when it comes to the survival of humanity on this specific planet at this specific time. So, if you care about that, then you might be interested as a fun diversion in participating or feeling into this battle. And the way that I perceive this battle happening is that it's very much a battle not of good versus evil. In fact, that's a major distraction. That's a major, like, sideline.
Red herring.
Total red herring. Complete red herring. It's a battle of what we could call the forces of integration versus, say, the forces of disintegration. And the forces of disintegration can be very good and very righteous in many, many ways, many dimensions. It's just that they're not interested in integration. They would rather have something else. They would rather have some form of splitting, of blaming, of projecting, of having the bad guy be over there, of not taking total and full responsibility.
Carolyn, are you saying that sometimes the forces of good are disintegrative forces?
I guess that is what I'm saying. Yes, it's sort of like the Tao Te Ching, like when when you call something good, you create evil, right?
Indeed.
It's that sort of splitting force. Mm-hmm. So the way that I think about it is that there's interests in this world that are interested in perpetuating that disintegrative view because they're able to get energy and get power the more disintegration that there is.
Like splitting atoms, there's just huge amounts of energy.
Yeah, they thrive on it. They thrive on the extreme political polarization, like, the lefties hating the righties and vice versa. They thrive on...
men hating women, women hating men.
All of it, mm-hmm. all of it. And they... So it's the classic, like, divide and conquer thing. Like, we'll pit, say, for example, we'll pit the poor white people against the poor black people, and that way we'll more easily
black
control
versus white.
all of them.
Yeah. I hear what I hear you describing is, like, I'm seeing it in my, like, little sciencey brain of, like, there's a polarity which when integrated is wholeness, and when pulled apart and set at odds with each other, like releases a huge amount of energy. When like black and white hate each other, or male and female hate each other, or like even like honestly even rich and poor hate each other, and don't realize their inherent togetherness on the spectrum.
And it's not even
good and evil hate each other.
Well, exactly. And what's interesting is it's not even just the polarization of hatred, it's also the polarization of infatuation. So like truly believing that, a human is a woman or is a man, and not understanding that at a spiritual level we're all hermaphroditic.
Right.
That is something that creates this like very, people get upset. Like, for example, I've met many women, and I'm sure and people of all genders doing this in some way or another, who are obsessed, and I've been this woman myself, obsessed with a man, completely obsessed with that man, cannot think of anything else but this whatever man.
Right.
And it's because they're not deeply in touch with the hermaphroditic properties of the masculine powers of their own soul. They can only perceive that's how the whole insane twin flame universe stuff gets propagated, is people feeding parasitically on people's obsession with the polarization of infatuation. And of course, the whole beauty industry and romance industry, weight loss industry, everything feeds on this. So basically, humanity is being parasitically fed upon by whatever, I don't know what we could call them. Some of them are people, some of them may be actual predatory spiritual beings, and there's nothing wrong with predation. Predation is the natural world, and just lions are not evil. And still, it's good to know, the lion sure seems evil to the deer, I'm sure, when the deer is getting eaten, antelope, whatever. So being aware of these dynamics of predation is good, and finding a way to maybe not be predated upon
and not to fall for the disintegration pattern,
because it's just fundamentally it's boring. Like, it seems exciting because there's all this energy in it, there's all this whiz bang hot energy in it, but it's repetitive, it's very mechanical. Actually, it's instinctual is what it is. So it's either like robotic and like operates at a logical or rational kind of repetitiveness, or it's purely, instinctual, operating at like an angry, aggressive, or sexual
lizard brain level.
Either way, it's not the higher order of beauty that our consciousnesses are ultimately capable of. And there's this fun channel called Formscapes, and the guy recently made this interesting argument about the will to the numinous. And I feel like go look on Formscapes and search for this. It's called something like the womb of whatever, I don't know. But it's
this is reminding me that like there's also a tremendous amount of energy to be released in the recreating of wholeness and the rebinding of things into oneness, which is sort of, paralleled in the atomic world by the idea of like fusion as a way to create energy, where fission is like the old aeonic, we're going to tear it apart and fission these atoms and blow things up. Whereas fusion also releases energy.
And is like creating your own sun.
Yes,
right?
And creates a sun. Yes.
So that's basically what I'm talking about, is the more we learn how to create our own suns within us, the more we become these gravitational centers of consciousness and, extremely rich and complex patterns of beauty. I often think about that show, which you read the books of, the Wheel of Time.
Yes.
And the Aes Sedai ladies, and how each of them has their own like spectacular individual halo pattern of light that represents their specific flavor of magic around them.
Right.
Like that's what we human suns are. We're not just like big homogeneous explosions of light. We're these fine, exquisite, unique patterns. Like I was thinking today about like the snowflakes, and like people use it like, oh, special snowflakes. Yo, every snowflake is special though. Every snowflake
Yeah, right.
Is actually unique.
Right.
That's how much God is into special snowflakes.
Exactly. Yeah, when Aleister Crowley says every man and woman is a star, he's actually saying every single person is a unique and special snowflake.
You're a snowflake star, because that's...
Well, and that's like a marriage of fire and ice. And
which is the Philosopher's Stone. I'm so glad we figured everything out for everyone.
Yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome, everybody. So just do more of that, and everything will be fine.
Anyways, so the forces of disintegration are huge, and they have huge social media platforms. They have huge corporate media platforms. They have huge grips on the psyches of humanity for thousands of years.
Well, and in many ways, they like exist like mycelial networks in the minds of all of us. Like we are all, to greater and lesser extents, depending on our, diligence in the great work, infected with the disintegration virus, and it's using our consciousness bandwidth to propagate itself. So why not join up with the mainframe of integration and like give that project more bandwidth?
That's what I'm saying. So that's what I've been working on lately, and that's what I've been receiving a lot of downloads from, which I've also been talking in these emails. I think I talked on this podcast about my dreams with Florence Farr. Do you remember me talking on the podcast about it?
Maybe.
Well, if you don't remember it, I might have to talk about it again, because
it's worth
you're essentially my listener, Laila. So, I had a dream. I had dreams a couple years ago when we first started Psalms during the first round.
I'm going to pause, Carolyn, for a second and let people know that the magic that Carolyn was talking about literally happened because Rory came back and brought her cookies, which she was very much wanting. So it happened.
I did express my desire for cookies, so it wasn't complete telepathy.
Okay, but the magic is in your word, Carolyn. So
that's true. Thank you, Laila, for pointing out my immense magical cookie power. And it is true. I have manifested cookies, chocolate ice cream, potato chips, basically all forms of junk food under a variety of entertaining circumstances, often without even the need to speak. So that does seem to be a city that I have acquired.
Give yourself credit for that.
Thank you.
Anyway, sorry, not to...
I call it the Miss Piggy City. If anybody really wants to know.
I want to call it Winnie the Pooh City, but Miss Piggy is more glamorous, let's be honest.
Miss Piggy and her chocolate cupcakes, and she's like wearing her marabou feather robe and like eating her chocolate cupcake. Anyways, Winnie the Pooh too. But where was I going? Oh, I just wanted to relate these dreams that I had.
About Florence Farr.
Yes. So this summer we did the first Psalms. I had this dream that I was in this immense, beautiful wooden pavilion, and it was covered with these like chivalric flags and all sorts of weapons, and there were people in these robes, and they were doing martial arts, but it did not appear to be Asian-style martial arts. It appeared to be some sort of Western European Grail tradition, kind of like sword and sorcery martial arts. And I had a teacher there in that pavilion, and she was beautiful, kindly, older British lady who had her hair up in a big bun, and it was white hair. And I heard somebody in the pavilion call her Florence Farr. And I woke up from that dream, and I just had that name ringing in my head. So I went to the search engine, and I'm like, tell me, who is Florence Farr? And then I felt like a big dumbass because I hadn't done it. Anyways, I should have known who she was, because she was the person who initiated Aleister Crowley into the Golden Dawn. She served as Hierophant in that ritual.
Wow.
She was also the person who refused him entry into the Second Order of the Golden Dawn, into the Rosicrucian Order. She was like, you're a liar, and you have sex with other people's spouses, and you probably steal money, and you're probably spying for the government, so no. But anyways... But she was his teacher, and she was a super badass lady. She was one of the first Egyptologists. She translated hieroglyphs. She brought a lot of the Egyptian lore into the Golden Dawn, and she had a personal relationship with a mummy in the British Museum. So there was this... she was walking in the British Museum one day, and she was started receiving psychic dialogues with this being that was in a mummy case from, it was a scribe from the Temple of Amun-Ra at Thebes, which is modern day Luxor, which I super want to go visit, by the way. I've been texting Laila all these things about visiting Egypt. I'm like, when are we going? Anyways, so she started receiving these communications, and she went to Mathers, who was her teacher, and was like, how do I know that these are legit? And he showed her these procedures for verifying them, and anyways, verified that these were legitimate communications coming from this entity, and that basically the entity was part of her own soul, part of her own higher self, who had also been incarnate in this scribe at the Temple of Amun-Ra, and gave her this information about how to do battle magic, how to do magic that can change things on Earth. And she started doing that. And so anyways, this was all stuff that I learned after having
this dream.
And after having, so I learned who she was, but I learned all of that stuff later after I had the next dream. And the next dream I had was, this was before I even decided to get pregnant with Solomon. I dreamt that I was pregnant, and I was standing in a line of other pregnant women, and we were in this like slush and muck and snow. It was like some cold, miserable forest. It was like some war situation in Northern Europe, it seemed. And it was like we were pregnant women waiting in line to see if we could give birth within the safety of this military hospital that had been set up. So there was this military hospital with like big tents, and it was like somehow clean and efficient in the midst of all this mud and misery. So we were trying to get in there. And they were having women step on this giant scale. And I remember sitting in that line and being deeply offended. I was like, what is this weighing of pregnant women? Are we body shaming pregnant women to get into a safe hospital to give birth? What the fuck is this? My dream ego did not like that. But I stepped on the scale, and as I stepped on the scale, I realized that no, the scale was not about body shaming. It was actually the scales of Mott. Mm-hmm. And there was a crocodile willing to eat the hearts of those who did not, their hearts were heavier than a feather. So anyways, a little bit of bragging here. My heart was as light as a feather. And
passed on.
I got that going for me, so that's nice. And I walked into the military hospital, and I was on this cot, and my midwife was the same woman, Florence Farr. Mm-hmm. She was like walking me around as I was like laboring, and she helped me give birth. And there were also, not to brag too hard, because there were also thousands of other women in this military hospital who waking up on reflection, I'm like, okay, these are all the other bitches around the world doing the work to, have hearts light as a feather and be able to birth things into being, people and creations that are, I guess, as I understand it, of the age of Aquarius, which was like something that Florence Farr was like really into, and obviously Aleister Crowley and everybody. So, where does that take me? Oh, right. Okay, so then I got really interested in Mott and Mott magic. And anyhow, I started receiving these teachings astrally from Florence Farr. And now I'm trying my best to begin. So she communicated to me that she wants this relayed. So that this is like not just whatever top secret personal for Carolyn stuff.
Right.
So I'm beginning to do my best to relay it, and I'm sure I'll do it in a highly imperfect fashion. But that's what's been on my mind lately, and it's been a struggle even to just talk about like what is the astral battle going on, because my mind wants to put it formulated in terms of good and evil, but like that ain't what it is, right. And I feel like many people I see on Instagram or whatever, various corners of the internet, go far, far astray and get themselves into very cloudy perceptions of the crystal when they do start seeing things in terms of like the bad baddies out there who are not me, who are doing the bad stuff, and they must be stopped. Because ultimately the forces of disintegration are also me. And it's like, the question is, how am I going to be in relationship with them in a way that creates the maximum toroidal coherence?
Yes.
So, does that sort of make sense?
Yes. Begins to crystallize. Well, and it makes me want to say again that, like, I strongly believe that anyone who is interested in joining in the battle for integration would be very well served to begin training by taking on a very serious and dedicated, jolly, existential kink practice, because I do feel that that is a technology that creates the light as a feather, like, way of being that, like, forgives and, like, accepts and doesn't perceive evil in the world and doesn't perceive evil in the happenings, and, like, it has the buoying lightness capacity for perceiving goodness and perceiving wholeness and perceiving, like, the good intent behind seemingly bad actions and, like, the greater lesson that's being illustrated.
Absolutely. I mean, it's absolutely existential kink that got my heart to be light as a feather, for sure.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that it would be the chief and first recommendation that I could give to
white belt practice in the Battle Magick dojo is getting very good at being willing to accept the lessons, accept the goodness that comes through trial and difficulty.
Mm-hmm. And the Golden Dawn put that, in their oaths in terms of, like, don't be ashamed of suffering. Mm-hmm. Like, don't be embarrassed of, like, pain happening to you in your life. Like, know that this pain is giving you it's an initiator.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes, that's one of my favorite lines from, well, anyway. Yeah, exactly. That, like, it's not evidence of your flawedness that you experience hardship. It's evidence that you are being called to seek greater wholeness and, like, transmute the disintegration into integration.
Like, and that was so huge for me. And that was something that, I want to really emphasize to everybody that, like, if sucky things are happening to you, it's not because you suck. It's not because you're being targeted by the universe for punishment. It's because you're being trusted by the universe to transmute this shit. It's because you are such a mega bodhisattva that the universe is like, who can handle this?
You.
You'll
know what to do with this. This is your work.
Yeah. And it's like, once I started realizing that, like, the pain and the torment that I was holding wasn't a negative judgment of me, but, I started receiving it as a positive consequence. Like,
right.
This is happening because you are so valued, because you are so trusted, because you're the one who can move this and transmute this. Then it became much easier to transmute it, because it's interesting, like, thinking about things just in terms of energy and sensation. It's like pain, suffering, there's a huge amount of energy there. Mm-hmm. And if you can find a way to be present with it in such a way that, like, you don't have to repress it so it doesn't depress you, but you can just meet it and assign it positive meaning. I feel like that's a great